Hello and welcome to Motor Week, this week from a very chilly Bridgnorth in Shropshire.
This is the Midland Motor Museum and we're here for a special programme tonight and for the next few weeks. As we approach Christmas, Motor Week have very generously asked all us reporters to decide which cars we'd most like to see stuffed into our Christmas stockings.
Big stockings.
Speak for yourself, lover.
Now, each of us here today have chosen one car that we've tested that has really stuck in our minds. Cars that have that little bit of something extra that makes them stand out from the rest. These are our cars of 1998.
And as you'll see from the cars we've chosen, that little bit of something extra could be anything from the tops in refinement to the best performance cars like the Jaguar XKR and the Audi TT Coupe. Here's one that caught Ginny's eye earlier on in the year.
Now, Italian cars have always had a reputation for having gorgeous bodies that needed rather too much attention under the bonnet, and Alfa Romeos were particularly guilty of this. In fact, in recent years, they've lost sales because of it. So when Alfa launched the 156, all eyes were on it to see if it could live up to the build quality of the likes of BMW and Audi. I went for a drive in it to find out. Just £17,600 will put you behind the wheel of a 156, and I reckon it's a small price to pay for such a vision. However, this 156 will make a slightly larger dent in your bank balance because on this version the beauty isn't merely skin deep. Underneath the bonnet you'll find an absolutely amazing 24-valve 2.5 litre V6 engine, the roar from which will make your chest hairs stand on end and will considerably soften the blow when you write out your cheque for £22,300. Now, while you gaze in admiration, taking in the beauty of this car, let me fill you in on its pedigree. Created by quite possibly the sexiest race on earth, the 156 was designed in Alfa's studio in Milan, a town that simply oozes style and passion. It has unmistakable Alfa styling cues all over it, the classic whiskers that run down to the headlights, the unmistakable V on the bonnet. And like the finest of supermodels, it knows that it's the little details that make all the difference. Like the way the boot key is cleverly hidden underneath the Alfa badge. The discreet rear door handles that make the 156 seem like it's a coupe. The gorgeous design of the key, it just begs out to be fondled. And what about the feel of the retro silver door handles in your hands? How long before these inspire a whole host of pretenders? That retro feeling of the silver handles is carried on the interior. It's absolutely gorgeous. It has curves in all the right places. And the deep instrument panels really add to the sporty feeling of the 156. And I just love the way this mahogany steering wheel feels in your hands. The leather sport seats do come as an extra, but I reckon they're so much nicer than the velour ones that come as standard, they're worth saving up for. All in all, the 156 is the kind of car that it's a pleasure to wake up to in the morning. But of course, as we all know, looks aren't everything. Personality counts as well. And even the entry-level 1.8 version is packed with it. So that must mean that this V6 is the life and soul of the party. Driving the 156 will put a huge smile on your face, and it gets about as much attention as a supermodel as well. Every time I left it parked up, I returned to find admirers, all wanting a closer look. So, the Alfa has got the gorgeous looks and the personality you'd expect from a driver's car. That was certainly the case with the Alfas of old, but the 156 really is in a different league. It feels solidly built and it simply oozes quality. And although it's too early to tell how all that will hold up over time, industry experts reckon that the 156 is going to have very high resale values, a sure sign that this car is built to last.
Now, Italian cars are all well and good if you like to use your heart rather than your head. But my choice reflects the great British tradition for grand sporting cars. And this past year, Jaguar have been celebrating 50 years of XK sports car production with the launch of the XKR. And I was there cutting the mustard in Dijon to see just how hot it was. Okay, cards on the table time. I've always been a big fan of Jaguar cars. I've only ever owned one Jaguar, an XJS, 9 years old, which unfortunately had to go recently due to far too many ominous sounds coming from under the engine and goodness knows where else. But thankfully those days of Jaguar reliability problems have long gone, and the XK8 has gone on to become the fastest selling Jaguar sports car of all time. Well, now the stakes are up considerably with this XKR. Now the new XKR really is drop dead gorgeous. There are no other words to describe it, and the main visual changes you'll find over the XK8 are this mesh grille at the front. You get these two bonnet louvers which are vital to aid engine cooling. There's also a discrete boot spoiler, again to aid stability, particularly at high speed, and these new huge 18-inch alloy wheels, all subtle, all discreet, but stunning. But it's here under the bonnet where you really need to look. Yes, it's that 4-litre AJ V8 engine, recently introduced to the saloon range, with of course the addition of the supercharger, those Eaton supercharger, and it's even faster than the XJR saloon. Power from this engine is a whopping 370 brake horsepower, 0 to 60 in 5.2 seconds, and a top speed limited to a mere 155 miles an hour. It would go quicker, I'm sure. This is the fastest ever mainstream production Jaguar. That supercharger delivers an extra 80 brake horsepower over the normally aspirated XK8, a car already voted the most beautiful two-seat luxury model in the world. And you can't argue with that, can you? Now, you may not think that £66,000 represents value for money, and to most of us, obviously, it doesn't. But if you're on the market for this sort of sports car, perhaps it does, because the rivals for the XKR are the Aston Martin DB7, which will cost you £20,000 more, and the large Mercedes 600 Coupe, which will cost you £40,000 more. This, in my opinion, is an absolute bargain, but not one you'll find at your local discount store.
This car is motoring perfection. The problem with that is perfection is inherently boring. To make it interesting, you need a fault somewhere. Or do you? In fact, it's near impossible to find anything overtly and outstandingly negative or wrong with this car at all. It's neither over nor underpowered. Neither does it show any signs of being particularly prone to drinking heavily. Even this, which is the thirstiest of all, the 2.8 litre straight-six engine version, returns a very respectable 31 mpg. The pricing is tediously sensible as well. It's not cheap, but then neither is it expensive. You get what you pay for. Quality. The 318i starts at launch at £19,500, rising to £27,500 for this, the 328i SE. But it's worth that much of anybody's money. Okay, slightly more than the last 3 series, but then the car is bigger in all directions and you actually get more equipment. So work it out, and it makes sense as well, but nothing too drastic. All still very, very sensible. It's no surprise that it's a great drive. The body shell has been stiffened for this new version, which does improve the handling, but to be honest, it was fantastic anyway on the old 3 Series. There's so much technology on board surrounding you in here that really press the wrong button at the wrong moment and you could accidentally launch a satellite. And you could also think that perhaps BMW believe that the first thing you and I are going to do when we slide behind the wheel of this thing is throw it through the nearest hedge. So much of the technology on board here is devoted to keeping everything pointing in the right direction. So we've got ABS and ASC plus T, which is automatic stability control and traction, a system for reducing wheel spin, together with CBC, cornering brake control, another enhancement to the braking system. This uses computer simulations to determine transverse acceleration from signals sent out by the 4 ABS sensors, and then boost brake pressure accordingly to correct oversteer. Basically, that means if you hit the brakes mid-corner, the system should help keep everything pointing the way you intended. So if your ABS, ASC and CBC drop you in the you-know-what, there's always your DSC to fall back on, Dynamic Stability Control. It can actually reduce the power from the engine and apply the brakes to individual wheels to restore stability if it detects that things are going a tad wonky. Oh, and then there's TPC, Tyre Pressure Control. So if the car suffers a loss of tyre pressure, there's a little light to let us know. So ABS, ASC plus T, CBC, DSC and TPC. And the side airbags are ITS, the immobiliser is the EWS, there's an AIC control rain sensor on the wipers, and noise from the 1.9 engine is reduced by 10 dB. Oh, and the bulbs have all been replaced by LED. Actually, the various traction control and technical gizmos do work incredibly well, as is demonstrated the first time you get a bit smart and switch it off. And really only then do you realise just how much the system was doing to make you look good. Just for being so good at doing everything that it does, the BMW has to be one of my all-time favourites. The question then, of course, is how do you improve upon perfection? A good question to ask a BMW design engineer in a few years' time, no doubt, when he's thinking, how do you follow that? There'll be more of that after the break.
Now here's a puzzle you might find in your Christmas cracker this year. Which of Santa's reindeer put a dent in the hopes of a car manufacturer to the tune of $100 million? Well, the answer, of course, was Ernie the Elk, the manufacturer Mercedes-Benz, and the car, the A-Class. But the German giants can still enjoy a Merry Christmas because the A-Class came bouncing right back, and this is certainly one of my cars of the year. After the costly embarrassment of failing the notorious Elk test, does the new A-Class Mercedes-Benz finally go to the top of the class in terms of the more technical angles of engine design and safety? And in any case, what changes did they make to the original tipper truck version? Well, for a start, the whole car has been lowered slightly, 13mm at the front and 10mm at the back. It also has a wider rear track and greater understeer has been built in as well. The shock absorbers were changed and so too were the tyre specifications. But apart from those things, this is pretty much the original design. And let's not forget that where the A-Class is concerned, they pretty much started with a blank sheet of paper. And no doubt, after much scribbling and crossing out, the result has some incredibly ingenious design work incorporated. Let's go and have a look around. Cunningly, they've been able to make the interior space just 4mm shorter than the C-Class version from the back of the seats to the dashboard. But it's far more flexible. All these seats can be made to disappear. I'll come round and show you. Right, just 3 levers to play with here. Lever number 1, back flips over. Lever number 2, whole seat tilts up. Lever number 3 down here, and out comes the seat. Voila! Anyone for a minivan? The reason there is quite so much space is very clever, because down here, that's a false floor. Not the place to stash your family fortune though, because under there you'll find most of the engine and transmission. And since that's below, it frees up the space in front for the passenger cabin. Because you're perched on top of what amounts to a sandwich of 2 floors, with the engine and gear train in the middle, the ride position is quite high, which gives better visibility all round. Side protection is also improved because the driver and passengers sit above the normal side impact accident zone. But the big safety advantage comes in the inconvenient event of a head-to-head smash. Front-on collisions account for almost 2 out of 3 accidents. Today all cars have crumple zones designed into them to stop the engine penetrating into the passenger compartment. Nevertheless, a lot of injuries happen for precisely this reason. In the A-Class, not only is the engine and transmission housed partly in front and partly beneath the middle of the sandwich floor, they're also tilted at an angle, so that in the event of a crash, the whole lot slides downwards rather than straight back. The engines have also been specially designed for the A-Class, and there are 3 versions. 2 petrol, 1.4 litre and 1.6, which delivers 82 and 102 horsepower respectively. This is the 1.6 version. And there's also a 90 horsepower turbo diesel, which features something called direct injection common rail system. See what you think of this. Conventional high-pressure injection systems have separate pipes feeding each cylinder. The Mercedes system uses a high-pressure pump that runs at a constant speed and supplies the fuel to the common rail pipe. This single pipe acts as a pressure accumulator and distributes the fuel to all the injectors, while the electronic engine management controls the injection pressure depending on the engine speed and load. Oh, and whilst we're at it, there's also an optional electronically controlled 5-speed automatic transmission, which happens to be the shortest and lightest of its kind anywhere in the world. So there. In fact, with the whole of the A-Class, Mercedes has pursued the concept of what they call intelligent lightweight design. It's based on the fact that a quarter of the weight of the car is made up of either aluminium, magnesium or plastic, which is 30% lighter than conventional steel construction. They've also used a stronger type of steel than usual in the body panels, so that they could be thinner and lighter. All in all, this is a little technological tour de force. Mercedes-Benz have clearly turned somersaults to make sure that this is finally one of the safest cars on the road. The design concept of this car from a blank sheet of paper is very clever. I'm very impressed by the false floor, which gives almost as much space as the C-Class, and the position of the engine and transmission, together with the electronic stability control, make this car one of the safest on the road. Unless, of course, you're an elk.
You know what it's like when you go to a motor show and you see a concept car and you think, yeah, that's pretty good, but what's going to happen? They're never going to build it. The accountants, the cost engineers, the project managers are going to say, no, you can't do that, and besides, nobody will buy it. But Audi took no notice of those prophets of doom. When they came up with the TT concept, they decided to go ahead and make it. Brilliant. Because this is the Audi TT Coupe, first shown at the 1995 Frankfurt show as a design exercise and then in Tokyo in 1996. Such was the reception of the car by press and public that Audi decided to put it into production. Of course, the name of the Audi TT game is aerodynamics. This is one of the most aggressively, sleekly styled cars ever to come out of the Audi factory. But despite the dramatic shape, the underpinnings are relatively mundane because this shares engine, transmission and floor pan with the Audi A3, the new Volkswagen Golf and the upcoming Volkswagen Beetle. And that's why the Audi engineers could get it into production in just 2 years. Oh, and built in Hungary, well, the bodies are assembled and painted at the Audi plant at Ingolstadt. They're put on a train and sent to Hungary, where the engine plant is. The engine's put in, the car's assembled, it's put back on the train and sent back to Ingolstadt again. You understand it? Somebody does. Inside, the car is as obviously styled as the exterior. This dimpled aluminium trim theme is repeated everywhere. Door handles, steering wheel, air outlets, gear stick surround, even the pedals are mock-ups of racing car competition design. The leading edge of the screen gives a very low-browed feel to the car, and at some city centre traffic lights I know, you're going to have to be leaning forward and peering up to see the red. However, the test for a car that simply shouts its sporting aspirations so loudly is, does it go? In the case of the TT, well, need you ask. This car has the 180 brake horsepower turbo 1.8 5-cylinder engine. Well proven but refined and developed for this installation. Four-wheel drive quattro transmission, of course, as you'd expect for an Audi. The maximum of 140 miles an hour and 0 to 60 around 7.5 seconds. That's not quick enough for you? Well, there's a 225 brake horsepower version of the same engine, 150 mile an hour top speed and a second quicker to 60. The waiting list for an Audi TT Coupe is expanding at an alarming rate, and if you haven't got your name down for one yet, you might well be out of luck.
So there we are, just some of our favourite cars from 1998. Quite a wide variety, I think you'll agree. And you know, Ginny, the great thing is we get to keep them for Christmas.
Dream on, Howard. Now, we reckon that choosing your one favourite car is a bit like choosing your one favourite record, and we just couldn't do it, so we're going to come back next week with even more.
Yes, indeed. We've got our heads together to compile a complete pick of 98. Now, I'm quite sure that Volkswagen's Beetle will be in there, and I suspect that the new Ford Focus will creep in there somehow too.
So join us again next week for a special programme on Christmas Eve in the beautiful surroundings of the Midland Motor Museum with some beautiful cars here in Bridgnorth in Shropshire.
I've always thought of myself as the generous one of the bunch, so who fancies a drive? Ginny, help yourself in.
Thank you very much.
It's all right. Help yourself in. And I'll taxi. I'll put it on expenses.